right, welcome back, rulers. This is the Team First Strike Force of Will podcast, our third running. And today we're going to be bringing you something a little bit different. It's more in lines with kind of the style of where this podcast is really going to be going from the future. We spent a couple of weeks talking about GP results and meta analyses and stuff like that. We're mostly kind of like players that like to play around with things that don't usually see the play. And I'm your host today, Sideways, and we have Lumius Butler and Shank. Yes.
I'm slowly transitioning over. Slowly.
Well, right now he's Lumius Butler until he finds his way, and then we have Shank over here. He is very calm today, as always, and he's actually going to be he's going to have something to tell us about a little bit later in the podcast. But before we get into that, I kind of want to have a discussion about playing jank. Some of you might know that term. We definitely use it a lot locally. I learned it from a good old friend of mine who taught me the ways of jank and rogue. And essentially it just means playing things that are completely unexpected, things that are off balance that you think you would never see at a high-level tournament. And 9 times out of 10, you won't. Usually they lack consistency or they lack a reason for existing in decks that other cards don't already do better. But sometimes, just sometimes with the right formula, they can really be a surprise and actually net you some wins legitimately. So I actually want to ask Lumius Butler here, what do you think you would consider as jank? What are some cards you would look at and consider to be the jankiest of jank?
In my honest opinion, what jank means to me is something that would catch me off guard that I don't expect because I'm so used to seeing things being played that when I go up against a deck that is unfamiliar and has brought something different to the play, it throws me off my game, and then I have to make a quick adjustment to the play style. And just different cards in general that you don't see that are meant to be used in a certain way, but then people find a way to use it the way that it's not supposed to be used. That's my definition of change. Just being able to be like, oh, I'm, for example, playing Amul, and I want to have more draw. Let me put Cheshire Cat in my deck, tap her to draw a card in response for cover and tap again. I've drawn 2 cards that turn, and one of those cards is the Cheshire Cat. That's a good example of what jank could be.
That is definitely jank. And your opponent usually wouldn't see that coming. Now, of course, seasoned players might look and say, I wonder if he's playing that combination. But a lot of times they probably wouldn't be anticipating that as one of your lead choices for cards to run in that deck.
Well, with the way that Amul is being built right now, they're building her towards the ramping situation where it's like, here's a Sacred Elf, tap Sacred Elf, here's a Millipede, turn 2, here's a Marabella, you just cry.
Yeah, I do love me some Marabella. And I could talk a while about Marabella, but I want to know what Shank thinks about jank. How do you feel about jank? What's a card that you would consider to be jank and why?
I would have to say jank. I would believe is something that's much different from what the meta and what people would expect. Such as running, what I'm doing today is a Scarlet, but I'm running her with blue and red, which a lot of people have been thinking about, but I think it's just so much different from what she was probably designed for, which is more of playing dinosaurs to just burn things. Instead, you're going for much more of the pseudo quick judgment, but while getting out big resonators. It's just playing it a different way. So I just feel with jank, it's just trying to take something that normal people would look at and think it's always the same way, but it's just playing a completely opposite way, and it almost throws people off guard.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that. And with that said about the ruler, we'll definitely be going a little bit more in depth about how we've been using her in recent events to really utilize her strengths and her weaknesses to capture games. As far as how I learned jank, I've actually been jank for some time now. My TCG roots go all the way back to Pokemon TCG back around 2012, 2013. Most notably, the most recent set out at the time was Legendary Treasures. And really, I didn't play at a competitive level. I just played locally with friends. And we'd always throw some stuff together, use cards in ways that they maybe designed or weren't designed for. But we usually have fun with it. And that kind of transitioned into Force of Will. But I definitely started to see jank at our locals with friends of ours like Omar. If you're watching this video, I'm talking about you. And like it's just crazy. I remember back during the days of Sylvia, he had very interesting ways of destroying my Sylvia. Back when he was running Arla, the god, he would do things like not necessarily turn Sylvia into things, but Sylvia versus Arla usually isn't a good matchup because you just remove 4 counters and blow her up. But he also took care of my other resonators, interestingly. He would Dreams of Flight them and then blow them up with his bows. And then play Send Back to bring his bows back and put them back down. That's all sorts of ugly. It is very ugly. And annoying. And I don't think I have very many wins against that deck. But that's just a good example of how you can utilize cards in ways that they maybe weren't designed to really find results, is where I'm getting at. And don't be afraid to experiment. And that's where a lot of this really comes into play. But it's not just cards that are jank. It can also be the way you interact with your opponent. Remember, card games are also mind games too. So the interactions you have with your opponent and the interactions you have like on the chase or certain cards you play at certain times can also be jank too. Like letting certain attacks go through to bait out certain responses so you can capitalize off of them. I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head. If either one of y'all have a situation in specifics, then feel free to interject.
I mean, the only time that I'm only seeing situations where I'm trying to base something out is when I'm playing against green. For example, when I was playing Amio versus Sherry, and I knew that Shank had a 7 wins in hand, the only thing I could do is, okay, I need to get this certain card out. I need to change the order of things in ways that I play the game and figure out how to get this card that can mess my deck up out of his hand. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to play a Soul Stealing Altar. So I led out with one card, and I made sure that the second card that I played was Angel of Hope, because I knew that he didn't want me getting more life. Play the Angel, he severains the Angel, and then I was able to safely get my Soul Stealing Altar out, and then be able to deactivate and get my stone that turn.
Mm-hmm. You removed the Severing Winds from his hand, which decreases or increases the chance that your opponent did not have another Severing Wind in hand, or the chance that they weren't willing to spend another Severing Wind on any more plays that turn, especially considering the card you were playing. So you use that as an effective way to get your opponent to really consider the board state and consider what future turns would look like depending on their decision. And that's a good thing to do. My philosophy is that the more decisions my opponent can or has to make, usually the higher chance there is that at least one of those decisions would be a bad one for them and a good one for me. But my philosophy on like how I play the game can usually be different from others, and it's a bit unorthodox. I think something like that in depth would be talked about at a later date. But really, we're just going over, not being afraid to take those risks, because you never know when you'll find something that actually works out for you. Some people like some cards, some people don't like other cards. Like Shank here, he used Lapis 1.0 a lot back in the day, and that was a ruler that really wasn't used a lot. But in his hands, he does pretty well with them. He understands that card well. He was able to utilize it quite effectively. And although it wasn't the most consistent in terms of showing compared to other rulers, when he pilots it, he makes that thing work. I've seen it. It is powerful. Tell us some of the things that you've done with Lapis 1.0 and his bullcrap.
I don't honestly have an example. It's been honestly too long since I built the deck. I just haven't had the time nor the idea to build Lapis again. I've been wanting to, especially with the new Killing Stone. Stoning to Death, Pseudo's cousin, Null Darkness,
Forbidden Arts,
Embrace the Darkness, and a lot of that stuff that I miss, because I used to love, being able to control a board, flip, have a very strong ruler that isn't easy to deal with, that, before B&B came out, and wrecked every ruler, and everyone had to play secluded. It was very nice to have that ability to have such a strong ruler that can basically take down any resonator in my way or block anything. I could also, of course, try and protect myself with the Regalia, which I used to love to do. Is to bait out, wait for them to play their final card to kill him, and then just tap my Regalia and put him back as a ruler. And Judgment again the next turn. And one of my favorite things is the God's Art, since I can take whatever I want from your deck. Resonator, Regalia, and Field Edition. So there's a lot of times where I got my Wind Secluded from their deck to protect myself. I also used to love going against Tree 1.0 because I just take their Alice and their Excalibrax, and I just had fun with it. Since I can't lose at that point, or at least it's very difficult.
Yeah, I definitely remember you using your God's Art against me at those times. And one of the first times that you actually used it against me, I remember you used my God's Art, or your God's Art, I should say. Yeah. Looked through my deck, and that's when I was playing Sylvia at the time. You took a Lancelot, a Wind Secluded, and a Levitain. And that made it very hard for me to effectively deal with your guild permanently, because first off, in order for me to destroy your guild on enter, I have to get through the Wind Secluded, which was already a pain in the butt. Secondly, even if I was able to get through the Wind Secluded and successfully deal lethal to Gil, you had the Levitain, the banish to give him a perishable. Plus, I had to deal with a 6/6 Swiftness body that could be pumped to burn one of my resonators for 7. So it kind of made the playing field a little even, if not overbearing on my end, because I necessarily didn't have answers to my own answers. And that's kind of what you have to think about when you're playing with and against Gil Lapis, is how your answers to things can also answer yourself. And so then you ask yourself, do you have answers to your answers? It's a very, very weird thing to think about. But that's effectively how it goes.
And I would say one of the best things about his God's Art is the fact that I played a lot of hand control to make sure I knew their hand, and then I used the God's Art to make sure I learned their deck. So going into Game 2 and Game 3, if it lasts that long, I knew almost every card that you could imagine. So side decking was about the only time that you could ever surprise me with the card, but by then I know the ins and outs of most of the cards in your deck, so I can just pre-plan, know your strategy before you know mine. Besides control, I used to play Apostles sometimes because it was fun, and it with Gil, the Resonator, the shift one, it was really fun to just get out Phoenix, swing, and just having fun with it. The times.
Oh, don't worry. Hopefully, we'll see more of Lapis. I want to see a lot more of a lot of characters. But at the same time, I would actually like to see an entirely new set of characters moving forward. We'll definitely have to talk about that more, maybe in a lore-like podcast. I think that would be pretty fun to do. I'd have to get the rest of the team on board with this, compile some interesting things to talk about over an episode. But what I'm really interested in talking about is the Scarlet list that me and you built today, Shank. We conceptualized it, put it into effect, took all that time digging out those cards, and came up with a very interesting list. It's not the most unique thing in the world. You've been seeing lists similar to this running around, but I think the spin we put on it will catch a lot of your eye. So go ahead and bring it up for y'all. And here it is. So right now, Shank, the deck list is on screen. So before we go over all the cards, can you just give us like a general idea of how this deck functions?
So the basic idea for this deck is to use the 12 pieces of hand control to, of course, control the hand and make sure that you get out any possible cards that could get in your way, such as if you're playing against Aggro, you want to get out like Pig, you want to get out Sylvia, you want to get out Piale if they're playing it, you want to get out the big resonators that can hurt you. With Mist, of course you want to hit the cancel spells, because a lot of times there's a point where you're going to be playing multiple hand control cards turn 2, turn 3, and you don't really want them Severings unless because you want to bait it out, which this deck can go around Severings a lot because of her ability. Besides that, you're just looking, the other half of the deck is just playing the hand controls to get things engraved, and using Prokaryotic Being to just be a huge beater that can be played for 2 will, give himself swiftness and possibly flying, and then just swinging for lethal or just to be a huge body that's tough to deal with.
Yep, pretty much what he said. And as he was saying, Prokaryotic Being is really our true beater for the deck aside from Scarlet herself. It definitely provides a secondary source of immense damage. And, we played this deck earlier. We took it for a test drive against my Keurig deck. And I actually won out against it. And we'll go out.
The second match, right? Yeah.
Yes. You won second and third game.
First and third game.
Well, yeah.
Second match.
Yeah. And so, we'll go over in more detail, how things work. But to extend off what he was saying about the deck, overall, it is heavy hand control. Having 12 cards to control your opponent's hand makes, for Scarlet, this is a very interesting idea, interesting concept, because they double as burn fodder as well. Not only are these cards ripping things out of opponent's hands, if either you would rather deal with the resonator on board, or if you don't have the will necessarily to pay for it, or you know enough about their hand that the card at the time you won't need, you can always pitch it to burn something for 5 and it removes cards from your hand. That puts us one step closer to the golden state of being able to flip over the Dusk Girl into Scarlet. But as we go down this resonator list, Prokaryotic Being is a very interesting card. A lot of people might not have seen it, but I feel like spending a little bit of time on this card is important to understand how the rest of the deck was built. So Prokaryotic being the blue-red monster that he is a magic life form with 0 attack and defense. You already know we have a problem because he isn't printed with attack and defense. So what does he do? Well, he gains +2/+2 for each chant in your graveyard. So we're running, if I recall correctly, 26 chants in this build.
Yes.
And so he's going to be very big, very fast. I can confirm. For 1 fire, you could pay. He gains swiftness until end of turn. And for water, he gains flying. So on turn 3, he can come in hot, but usually he comes in a little later. So effectively, you want to be able to control your opponent's hand with things like Thought Control, Nameless Mist, and Scorn of Dark Alice for a little while, get their resources down, also burn away their bodies that they do put on the field with other cards that are in the deck. Eventually get into a point where you have a bunch of chants in your grave. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. It could be 5 or 6. But even at 5 or 6, Prokaryotic Being becomes a 10-10 or 12-12 body that can gain flying and swiftness. That's pretty hard to deal with going into mid-game if you're not fully prepared for taking him down. And keep in mind that you're low on resources at this time, so you're not always going to have answers for him. Aside from that, we're running 2 Charlotte's Protector. Sounds counterintuitive in Scarlet, but it does give access to an additional card to potentially use either for pitching or for utilizing its effects. Me and Shank collaborate on this deck, and I gave him kind of the framework, and then I let him spice it up with his own jank. And this is one of the cards he chose. Actually, Shank, can you tell us more about why you chose this card specifically?
So I kind of chose this card for the main point that you're going to be discarding a lot. And I played a different build that was black, red, white that focused more on controlling the board and just trying to kill resonators. So from that, I learned that there's a few times where I didn't quite want to flip and that I wish I had a card or two more in my hand. Whether I was just trying to, deal 5 to kill a blocker because I wanted to swing for game, but they had like 2 resonators up. Or it's just something big that, if it's over for attack and I can't pump for enough, I can burn something, then Judgment, then hit them. But there's a lot of times where I want to kill a blocker and hit another resonator. So there's just a few times that I wanted to have that draw in, and I just felt that it was a good choice from our matches. I felt that there was a lot of times where I was able to, discard it, draw a card, either draw into something I really needed, or just immediately pitch it to deal another 5 to kill something. Such as, Sylvia, Pig, 2 Sacred Elves if you want to. It's fun.
I saw a lot of Sacred Elves in those matches. A lot of Sacred Elves. Man. So, actually, Lumious Butler, tell me, what do you think about this card?
I really can't say much because it came out of Curse with Frozen Casket, and I wasn't really that much of a player in Curse. But I do understand the whole idea of he needs that card in his hand. Yeah. When I was playing against Scarlet, with Anno, because that's the only thing I'm playing right now, the only effective way that I could have dealt with the Scarlet was just Mephistopheles and had to invert him. And since he's doing -2/-2 to J/resonators, it immediately kills the Scarlet. So he now has to find a way to get rid of this Mephistopheles. And like you said, being able, when he goes back, he doesn't have a hand. And the only thing he can do is just pitch 1 to do -5. Not -5, deal 500 damage. So now that he has this Shaw's protecting his deck, he can now just pitch to do another 5, draw and do another 5.
Yep. It actually combos well. A little better than I was expecting it to go. So it definitely works out. And then we have an interesting choice in Alice, Girl to Blue Planet, being the 5/6 that she is. I'll briefly just say why she's in the deck, and it's simply for her ability to use a God's Art, which is Azure Bonds. It's cost 0, and you name a non-magic stone card. As long as she's in the field, neither player can play cards with that name. So it's not the best thing in the world, but it's at a 1-of for the chance that you do draw into it. You can drop it, activate the God's Art once you're at 4 stones, since she does have a seal of 4, and stop your opponent from playing a card that could potentially either deal with your strategy or slow them down a bit. And this actually did slow me down in the 3rd game, I believe, 2nd or 3rd game, where I would have been able to close it if it wasn't for this Alice, because I had high speeds in my hand and I was going to burn his life away. But because she was in the field and he called high speed, I had to answer her before I was able to play the card, and that took me a couple of turns because he was ripping out resources from my hand. So I think I like this choice. I think it's something jank. It's something that a lot of people will look at and go, ew, bad. But I think it's something that you shouldn't knock till you try it. And it's at a 1-of, since it's not integral. All you really need is 1.
And I personally really liked it because of the fact that I'm playing so much hand control, I probably know what's in your hand. So there was a couple times where I played it, looked at his hand, saw what was the threat. She was already on the board, so I just God's Art named the high speed because I knew that he had 1 hand, and I knew that that was just going to be the end of me. So I was able to look at the hand, know what was the immediate threat, and what to God's Art for, which I think is the biggest thing. Because if you can't look at the hand, then you're just guessing at what's the worst thing. But being able to look at the hand and use the God's Art leaves a lot more open.
Yes, it does.
What was interesting was you played that card on when you only had 3 stones up. So like you said, you were able to have a little bit more advantage because he needed to answer it, but he didn't have the answers in his hand. Come turn 4, call the stone. You've now basically locked down from him using that one card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then a lot more of these, they're self-explanatory. Like Ultra Dragon Shooting Star, any deck that is running any base form of red should be running him depending on their speed. Like for my Keurig, I actually don't run him main, I run him in the side. But even then, if it wasn't for the fact that my deck is built in a very specific way, he would be in the main. He actually was for a while. And it took a lot of me to take him out. But, he's essentially just a great red card. Barrier to blue and black, has flying. 1,000 attack and defense on a 3-cost body is phenomenal. And whenever your opponent tries to cheat in a resonator, it drops 2,000 on their head. And most of the time, they're going to die from that. Fantastic card. Only drawback is that when he gets put into a graveyard from the field, you discard a card at random. Good thing about Scarlet is that she's not particularly worried about this because it inches her closer to being able to judgment. So I think it's great. And then Blazer, easy. Red, black, 2 void. Swiftness and flying. A recurring beat stick once you hit 6 will or more. An automatic choice for anything that's running red and black. Hands down. But one card that we actually didn't see in our matches that I do still think is a valid choice for this deck is Viola the Vengeful Ebon Dragon. Same cost as Blazer. Also has flying and swiftness. 200 less attack and defense. But whenever she attacks, she destroys another resonator chosen at random. So if she's the only thing on the field, first off, she doesn't choose herself. Second, if she's the only resonator on field and your opponent is loaded with resonators or a couple of big bodies, one of them is going to be destroyed before she even finishes her attack. Is this something that you might keep in the deck, Sam?
I'd rather hit it and actually get to play it because 2 of the games, it was in my starting hand, and knowing me, I was like, I don't want this in my starting hand because it's a high cost for the first turn, and it's not like Blazer where I can recur it later on. Hence why she's not played as much as Blazer, but I still feel that she's going to be a strong card because if they do only have 1 resonator, I draw into her, I can just immediately play her. If I already have flipped Scarlet, so I have no hand, I can play her. She can't hit Scarlet, so Scarlet gets to live. And past that, she's just able to have swiftness, which is huge for the deck, to just closing out games.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that I personally think that she should stay in the deck until proven otherwise. You know. So I like her. I think she's good stuff. Now I know some people might be looking at this by now and have seen it for a few minutes now and looking at why is there an IU special power medicine in this deck? And my answer to you, my friends, my viewers, is that why not? And the honest reason why this ended up in the deck as was is because when we were looking through, this was kind of a last minute build. We didn't have all the cards we wanted with us here at the shop to build it the way that we had originally planned it. So we need to fill the space. And we were looking through the cards and this came up and I was joking with Shank and I was like, you should definitely put this in Scarlet, bump her attack and defense by 2, bump her to a 12-4, and we were laughing about it. We were like, that's kind of funny. But then we threw it in there anyway. And there was a card that I can't recall. There was a card that we mentioned as being the sole reason why this even entered the deck as one of.
Spare side of Mephistopheles.
Yes. Okay.
Because I don't really like the fact that she only has 200 health. The extra 200 doesn't help in a lot of matchups, and the attack isn't huge, but it is something. And if anything, it's just another card I can pitch. I may or may not take it out. It's still up in the air. I only got to use it the 1 game, so I only got to see it a little bit, and it wouldn't have changed too much since she herself can bump her attack. But the extra 200 can be good, and if it's the only thing I can play the first turn, it's one turn thing, and if nothing else, it's just going to help me later on in the game. And against Meph, it was really bad to just have no hand, have her flipped, have a Meph, with Amu go from the top of the deck to the spare side, killing her instantaneously, and I have to wait a turn or two before I can actually kill him. So it's just mainly for that one matchup and hoping that it proves its worth, but otherwise I'll have to take it out. We'll have to see.
Alright. Yeah, we'll definitely have to try it out more. A lot of the stuff in this deck was really a first test run. A lot of these things are subject to change, except for really the core, like the beings and the hand control and whatnot. But I do like the direction it's going. It's definitely running a lot smoother than it was before we made the edits. And to kind of burn through a couple of rows, we have 4 Thought Control, 4 the Nameless Mist, and 4 Scorner Dark Alice to round off that hand control package. And there's 12 in here because of what we said earlier, everyone benefits from it. If you play the hand controls, you get to look at your opponent's hand, rip things out usually. By playing them, by making them hit the grave in general, Prokaryotic Being gets an increase in attack and defense. And if you can't play them or you would rather deal with threats on the board, you can always throw them away with Scarlet's effect to burn them away, still making Prokaryotic Being stronger. The only thing I could think of off the top of my head that would really nerf Prokaryotic Being is the removal of a graveyard. So that is one thing to keep in mind. But overall, I think this is still a solid direction that we're headed. There are 4 Bear Magic in the deck. Since we're running blue, we wanted to be able to stifle any potential aggressive power or anything that's building up large power trying to take Scarlet down before she has a chance to shine. Shank, you mentioned that you were thinking about dropping this number down to 3 or 2 or something like that.
Yeah, because I felt like the only time that it made a difference was the one time that I casted I discarded it to deal 5 to something, then used the Remnant to kill it, making it 4/4, damage kills it. But a lot of times I just had it in the hand and I didn't really want to play it. I just wanted to discard it. Because playing it means if I play something else, I'm playing the Severings, or it has the possibility to get canceled by Fair's spell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of times I just want to discard it, and there's not a lot of things that have over 10 health in the game, or at least that people play.
Mm-hmm.
Especially our matchups. The highest thing that you have was Maribella, so I was like, okay, well, it takes 2 hits to Maribella no matter what, and me playing the card means that you have the chance to make it cost more, which in turn just makes it worse for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know of any real match, anything that it was going to help for, so I was thinking about dropping it down 2 and actually adding Aqua Soul.
I think Bear Magic truly shines once we start dealing with Resonators with 1100 defense or more, because once you start breaking down the math, it would take 3 counts of Scarlet's burn to take them down, whereas it would take a Bear Magic plus a burn to take them down if you casted the Bear Magic. So I really think it really shines against decks and Resonators that have 1100 or more defense that can really tank those burns. And there wouldn't be anything wrong with throwing those 2 in the sideboard maybe, or throwing 1 in the sideboard. That way, if you see that you need it, you can always bump up that number.
Yeah, definitely. I don't see myself not playing at least 3 in the deck inside. I imagine them though closer to a playset. Just because it is nice. Because again, going against Sherry,
the 13/13 doll, the 11/11.
Yeah, stuff like that. That it would be nice to have 1 card and 2 will to kill something, and only one of them can be Faired spell.
Mm-hmm.
And Severance doesn't work, so that's always nice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, beyond that, I still want to try it out more before I change the number too much. I may just drop it 1 for the next test, just to try and see how many times I draw into it, how many times I wish I drew into it, thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the rest of the self-explanatory spells are a couple of Heavenly Fruit for that emergency pitch. You never know. Sometimes you need an emergency panic button, and this is what that provides, essentially. And then you get to play cards off of it, Not really too hard to see why this would be in the deck. 3 Command of Life and Death to get our Resonators back. Gets everything back except the Blazers and Viola, but Blazer himself is recurable, so that means Viola is the only Resonator in the deck that can't be pulled back to the field. Then we have 3 Magic Rebound to help fight against cancel spells or abilities that target things like that. It also helps against IU when she attempts to give things Pierce to try to burn past any blockers you have. You can just take away the Pierce and put it on something else, assuming the card resolves. It still needs testing as well. We didn't really get to use it, but I think it serves a purpose. And then finally, 2 Null Darkness. Since our deck already heavily burns Resonators, we only use it as a 2 of just in case we need that immediate destruction. So it makes sense why it's at 2. And lastly, our stone lineup for now, which is also subject to change, is 4 Magic Stone of Scorched Bales, 4 Magic Stone of Hearth's Core, and finally 2 Magic Stone of Dark Depths to round off that package of will. So we have 8 sources of fire, 6 sources of water, and 6 sources of black. The original idea why we did this way is so that we have a higher chance of being able to burn away Resonators than not being able to. But as you said, Shank, you might shift the number of black in the deck to be more prominent, so that way you can actually play your hand control spells more often.
Because it really hit the one time where I hit her score, and I was like, okay, I have 4 of my cards were just hand control, so I was like, that's a whiff I don't like. You didn't play Resonator, which means that will went unanswered, and I'm a very will efficient type of guy. So it kind of felt bad. Tapper Stone again hit another her score, and that just really hurt me in the fact that I then couldn't do anything. So if you didn't play another Resonator, it's just 2 turns where I didn't do anything. Luckily for me, you did play a Sylvia, so I was able to actually discard 2 of my cards, but compared to the fact that if I gone turn 1, hit a Sylvia, gone to 2, and then hit 2 more cards, instead of paying 3 cards to get out 3 cards, instead of 2 cards to get out 1.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this is heading in the right direction. And this is a Scarlet is a ruler that a lot of people have been asking, like, how do I build this? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I don't think anyone has really found an answer. And I don't think we've necessarily found the answer either. A lot of the lists we've seen, I haven't looked at lists in detail, but I've seen some lists using blue. I think blue is a natural option for her. A lot of people that are looking at this ruler in detail is gravitating towards blue for a good reason. And it starts to become understandable once you play with and against the deck. It starts to become prominent. Now, I can't remember if any of the lists I've seen before ran Prokaryotic Being. Did either of you see any lists that ran Prokaryotic?
Can't recall anything besides what the original list that you had sent me.
Okay. So I'll keep my eye out for more on that. And if you guys have any lists, some Scarlet lists, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. That way we could spread around information, get some ideas going, get the maximum amount of jank out there. That's what we're really aiming for. Let's try to make Scarlet really good, because I do believe the more rulers that we're able to see compete, even at a basic level with other rulers, the better off we are. We don't want to see just a few things doing well. We want to see a lot of things doing well. And overall, I think this is some really fun stuff. If it wasn't for the fact that I don't have a Scarlet, I would be building this deck right now. I would be playing this. This is something that looks like I would love to play. But I'll have to do that in the future. Right now, I'm still trying to figure out how to get this Shayla deck to function at all. That's hard. I'll let you guys know how that goes. But spent a lot of time talking about, the Scarlet list, kind of like you could say it was a deck profile in a way of a deck we built just a couple of hours ago. But I also wanted this to be a way for us to kind of showcase like the thought process behind these ideas, how we're utilizing these ideas in things that aren't exactly meta, and how they can function. And we're going to try to do more of that from now on, as well as talking about just cards in general. I would like for us real soon to kind of discuss how we can make decks operate, under strenuous conditions like these. And that's pretty much all it is for me. And we're running out of time almost. We're recording this late at night here at the shop. It's going to be closing soon. But this is essentially what we're going with this. And yeah, I'm pretty much out of words. Anything you guys have to say? Like, since you didn't get to play against the deck, Bryson, how would you feel if you had to go against something like this?
I mean, I treat it the same way that when I first encountered Scarlet for the first time. I would try. I know that her whole game plan is to discard cards, so I'll try to use that to my advantage. Try to make my opponent waste as many resources as they can, and try to put themselves, knowing that they are at an advantage, at a disadvantage.
And how would you do that, knowing that she wants to get rid of cards?
From my perspective and the way that I would play it, I would just keep banging out stuff. Like my little fodder, like my Knight of Hopes. I'll just drop a Knight of Hope, and if he wants to get rid of it, then that's less resources and less ammo he has to pitch at me for my bigger body resonators that actually have a chance of surviving. And then Amil herself, with Imperishable, keep coming back and getting life. He has to keep swinging into me. And then, unless he doesn't drop that Ultra Dragon, he doesn't have a really way of stopping me from looking at my top 3 cards and just keep dropping resonance for free. Does making Amil stronger, does making my life gain a whole lot better.
Do you think that dropping the weaker resonators would be a detriment to you, knowing that Scarlet would really want to get cards out of her hand, and so you're providing a way for them to get cards out of their hand?
Not really, because since I'm running Soul Stain Altar that goes into Life Returning Altar, if she's going to pitch stuff out of her hands and stuff like this, I can't target Ultra Dragon, but I can target the Procreated Being. I'll just use that to my advantage and just sacrifice my own creatures to deal damage to that Procreated Being, making it weaker when I want to swing into it, or if it wants to swing into me.
How about if they try to burn away the Resonator before they put the Prokaryotic down?
Define burning away. Like, what's...
Well, remember, Scarlet is able to throw away cards to burn Resonators. And remember, she wants to burn away Resonators and get rid of her cards in her hand. So, as we were saying with Scarlet, she wants to get rid of her hand. At any point in time, she's willing to throw away cards.
At that point, I would ask myself the question of, since I'm dealing with her black side, more importantly, her ruler side, I would probably sideboard into Circle of Protection, just so that way she can't target me down that way.
Huh. That's actually a good idea. So, yeah.
And from what Sam has in his deck, he doesn't have any type of addition removal. So he's having to find a way to play around the Circle of Protection to get rid of my little fathers and my bigger bodies.
That is a true point. I just wanted to have that perspective, just see how it would feel on the other side of the tracks. Yeah. That is all for us. It was kind of, like I said, a little bit of a deck profile. But tell us what you think about this deck profile, and tell us if you want us to do more of these in a podcast style going into the future. We're definitely open to the feedback. And as always, we're trying to improve bit by bit. This is Sideways. We have Lumia's Butler, and we have Shank.
Hello.
And we're signing out for this one. We'll try to bring you some feature matches real soon. We're getting that set up as well. So hopefully we'll have good news to report on that in the near future. It is finals. It is finals week and whatnot. So we're kind of busy, but we're trying. We'll get more of this content out. But anyway, guys, that's it from us. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.